I was asking our last panel to give me a sort of report card, as it were, on where we are. And Anna, let me start with you on this first question. What is your assessment of how well we're doing when it comes from moving from that innovation, from the development of those solutions that we've heard about, and we've heard about the actual impact they're having and the potential impact they could have, but how well we're moving in terms of the implementation, their deployment on the ground. What would your report card say on where we are?
Difficult to say, because we as Eurocai, as standardizers, we're really just the enabler in the middle, right? So we are kind of used as a vehicle to bring the solutions that come out of the research, to bring those to a wider audience. So for me, it's difficult to say how much of it is implemented, but what we can say is how much of it we see coming into the standardization world. And that's huge, it's massive. If we see, we have 50 working groups running at the moment in Eurocai. More than half of those are one way or the other directly related to SESAR and taking SESAR solutions, mature research and development results, bringing that into the standardization arena and opening that up beyond the SESAR membership, opening that up also beyond Europe. Many of those working groups are being held jointly with our international partners, mainly those from the US. So this really exports European excellence and European knowledge into the world, and that enables and helps global competitiveness also of the European industry.
Come back on where the gaps are, where we need to focus more in the future. But Luke, from your perspective, that report card on how well we are doing in this, I'm loath to use it because it's such a cliche, but in crossing that valley of death.
I think it's a lot has been said already before in terms of availability of the solutions. I think on that there are no questions. I think technology is there. We see the potential of technologies, but there is this, and that came very well from the previous panel, there is this missing element, which is how to set up the regulatory conditions to enable the service providers to provide their services in the safe environment. And we are here in front of probably something which has been foreseen with and what Andreas mentioned in his introduction. We are now really closer to the program in order to accompany suppliers, service providers to prepare for the introduction, the implementation through what we are now establishing a certification framework. So that will be the reply. It has been a bit slow, or it has been not so well implemented because we were missing something. And I believe there we have now we are set up the right baseline.
Come back on what you're missing and where we are now in a moment. But Mariagrazia, if you can complete the picture for us in terms of how well we're doing. Do we have really the best possible enabling environment? And if not, where do you see the gaps?
Yeah, so from point, SESAR deployment manager is responsible to implement and coordinate the implementation of a part of the SESAR solutions that are coming out from the research part. So on that I can see that a lot has been done, and it was mentioned also from the panelists before. In particular, it was mentioned by Mr. Arnaud Fest, the CEO of Brussels Airport, and what he was referring to are all projects that are under our coordination. So it's the APOC, how the taxi routing has been improved, but also other projects. I see a lot of implementers around the room today, from the NSPs, the airlines, the airports. In total, 94 are the members of the framework partnerships that have implemented SESAR solutions of the Common Project 1. So indeed, a lot has been invested. There is a big support in terms of funding, but a lot has been done as well. Now, where I see the margin, because there is a but, and there is a margin of of improvement. And it's exactly what was mentioned before, is about advanced technological digitalization. It's really to push hard on the digitalization. Among the 5, well, I say 5 because the 6 still has to receive the green light for implementation, but among the 5, I see a big level of commitment and compliance for 4 of these functionalities, but the 5th, that is SWIM in particular, is where the real digital switch is. I don't see yet the right speed that should be there.
And what, to you, is the reason for that?
I think it is due to many factors we can discuss afterwards, but is also related to a different prioritization of the activities among the investors. So they prefer to prioritize other implementation instead of SWIM. And this is where we need to provide more support, and this is what we are doing to try to speed up the implementation, and where we need to join forces among institutions, but also with supporting stakeholders to accelerate on that. And then, of course, is trajectory-based operation is the next step. But this is the margin of improvement that I see. And I want to state again, a lot has been done. This has to be recognized thanks to SESAR, thanks to the speed, thanks to the push coming from research. And then, of course, for what is regulated and then needs to be coordinated and synchronized, a lot has been done from the implementing partners together with our support as SDM. So all that has been done has an impact not only at airport and airline level, it has an impact also on ATC. Just to comment some of the things that were said before, it has an impact of it on ATC, because if we implement free route, if we implement flexible use of airspace, optimize airspace management, dynamic and airspace configuration, this has an impact on ATC. So this has to be clear.
Thank you. Look, let me come back. You were talking about the certification framework. You said it had been a little slow, but it was now getting there. What have been the barriers? What has been holding up progress? And where are we now, in a bit more detail, if you would?
I think what we have seen with SESAR 1, SESAR 2, if I can call it like that, it's the absence of monitoring of the maturity of the technology to be integrated into the network and to be still meeting the safety requirements, but also what the controllers were expecting to see as a solution ready for use. That was probably missing. That was why, I mean, even industry has developed a lot of solutions. They've been not so much ready for deployment. So it took 2 SESARs, if you want, period, and now we are entering into a new context where the EU legislator, when they decided to launch SESAR 3, they integrated the role of the regulator into the assessment of the technologies in order to support the SESAR GU in his role to facilitate the entry to market. And this partnership is new. And it's probably where we will probably have to capitalize all together on this. So it has been slow because absence of clarification of how to define the conditions to enter the market. As Anna said, also lack of standards developed at the same pace. And thirdly, probably a master plan which was not sufficiently precise on the requirements expected by the airlines to see it as the solutions to provide the best level of services. So that will be the three reasons.
And when do you expect this now to?
It's starting now. I mean, we are, and it's the good news probably today, I think, and most of us have seen already, we are starting to get the effects of it now. And we are now completely engaged by the European Commission to report on and to help the SDM, the deployment manager, to know what should get the green light. As soon as the green light, then as soon as you define the baseline of what is technically from environmental perspective, cybersecurity, and safe perspective compliance, then you can start to think about an incentivizing scheme to enable maybe the release of funding. Ms. Mariagrazia was not convinced about that, but we believe without that we will still have probably a slow pace. So this is probably where we see starting, we feel the change is coming now on the top of the certification framework, which is there.
And Anna, you said a lot of work is going on in this area, but we still do. We had a lot of pleas in our previous panel for that harmonisation, that interoperability. Standards so absolutely central here. What for you is the key to accelerating that work?
I think what was mentioned earlier on in the panel was a really important message, this need for interoperability, this need for harmonisation. And I think what we see now with SESAR 3, what has not been so systematically done with the previous SESARs, is that there's really a systematic, there's an expectation that each project at the end of its work doesn't just say R&D done, all good, huh? we're going home, but that there's an element of going forward and an element of what needs to happen to achieve interoperability and to bring this on. And standardization is now one of the expected outcomes. It's looked at much more systematically from the SESAR point of view, but also from our point of view. The fact that we three sitting here together, and Andreas here in the first row, is really this innovation pipeline approach that, there's the R&D work, standards, regulation need to fit together. And we are doing a lot of coordination between the different teams, so that we ensure that we can actually offer a complete package to the industry at the time that they need it to deploy. So that, of course, needs the regulatory part, but the standards need to be there to support that as means of compliance, and then towards the deployment. And I think this is something that has not been done as well in the past, and that has probably also slowed things down, but we see that this is accelerating now. The other element maybe to this, in terms of how can we even further accelerate, is we have some very good examples now. I think the previous panel and some of the keynote speakers mentioned virtual centers. This is obviously still very early days and very innovative technology, but we have started already to launch a working group on this subject very early on, where everyone said it's way too early to do any kind of standardization work and any kind of real. We don't even know what the concept will look like when we get to that. We still launched the working group at the time. And we said, okay, we won't do standards, but we will look at what will need to be standardized one day, so that when we're ready to launch standardization activities, we actually know what to do and what to focus on.
You talked also about working with international partners on this, and I wondered how the work in Europe on standardization areas compares with the rest of the world. Are there lessons? We've talked a lot about lessons learned as we look to the future. Is Europe acting as a leader in this area, or are we trailing behind? How are we doing, and what is the key to that international cooperation for you, Anna?
I think we are leading on a number of topics, on very many topics, in fact. And this international collaboration, whether that goes through the SESAR, FAA, SESAR Next Gen cooperation agreement, whether that goes through any of the other cooperation agreements. EASA has a huge international cooperation program. I think that can only help create global interoperability and harmonization, which we need. You don't want to switch over to a different technology in the middle of the Atlantic, right? So I think this can only help achieving international.
But it's also, Mariagrazia, isn't it important that the European standards developed in Europe become the international standard, that race for whose standard is going to be the one that wins out. I mean, listening to Luke, and sorry, Annie, did you want to come back?
Yes, just on that part. And we do see that in one of the ICAO air navigation conferences a couple of years ago, there was a paper from India saying, look, ICAO, you actually don't need to do anything on remote towers. There's a Eurokai standard which you can just recognize. So we do export knowledge and we do export our competency.
Mariagrazia, reaction to that?
Yeah, no, it's indeed the global dimension is paramount. So, and we operate under a US-EU Memorandum of Cooperation, where SESAR 3JU and SESAR Deployment Manager we are really active on those, and where there are important priorities that we are discussing in these days that is about trajectory-based operation, and where we want to push for European view to be shared globally. I believe we are a step forward, if I may say, if we compare to the Americans. I hope there are none Americans. but I think we are in a good position to share our lessons learned, our ambition, and how this has to work for the future.
Luke?
I think it's not an option. I think our airlines are flying at global level. If we start to develop regional solutions, that will cost a lot to them. So it's de facto mandatory, and it's what Anna said, it's also based on what ICAO is establishing as the baseline, but we have also intense bilateral discussions with our colleagues at FAA to ensure that at least the two main aircraft manufacturing industry are preparing their fleet.
So Mariagrazia, we've been talking a lot about the progress that has been made. We've talked in the previous panel about some of those solutions and the difference they are already making and the progress we have made. But for you, in this space, the space of standardization, this issue of interoperability and harmonization that came up so much in our first panel, what for you is the key now in terms of the challenges we need to address if we are to really accelerate that deployment, accelerate that implementation? Where does the focus need to be?
I think there are three important points. The first one is related to all of us in terms of institutions, but also in terms of the implementers, the real investors, on key priorities. Because we need to find out, okay, what are the key priorities in the short and long term, and how we achieve that, especially how, if we are ambitious in the long-term perspective, as the ATM Master Plan is, how we reach that ambition step to step. But we need to set up the real priorities and work all together to reach the priorities and the level of ambition. The second one is related to the prerequisites. There are already solutions that have been validated, that have already the right framework in terms of package, as Anna was referring before, in terms of standards, means of compliance, regulatory. We need to push and accelerate on those prerequisites because it needs to be done. And again, is two important things, that is SWIM and initial trajectory-based operation. And the last one is it was said before, is to prepare the package for deployment. Because one of the hurdles of the past was really that, okay, the solution is there, it's been validated, but then the step to boost the implementation was not there. Two things can boost implementation. The fact that we have a complete package coming from regulatory side, standard side, specifications, means of compliance, and this is really my experience, the boost was coming also by the funding, because airports, airlines, NSPs, the NSPs needs to of course, give back the money that they receive in terms of funding for the benefit of the airlines, but that money helped to speed up and anticipate some investments. So these are the three things I believe we need to touch together.
And this point that Anna was making, just to follow up on that, about this more systematic approach to addressing these issues. She was saying this is now built in to what you do. How much difference is that going to make in practice to the way these projects work?
The difference is that, the projects that we are coordinating are fortunately already covered by this package, but it could have been even faster if the package was available when the regulation was set out back in 2014. So then there was, of course, a review of the regulation. But if this package was there already at the beginning, the implementation could have been maybe faster and a bit more harmonized in terms of implementation. Now we are on it, so it's going well anyhow, but it came a little bit after, and that's why sometimes we say, yes, but we need to speed up implementation. Huh?
Luke, for you, as we look to the future and the key issues we need to address, Mariagrazia has highlighted some key areas of focus. What for you will be key?
Yeah, I will respond more from an institutional perspective.
Absolutely.
First of all, SDM should be empowered. SDM is a facilitator, it's an instrument, but does not get the teeth to enable the deployment as it would have been expected to become in the future. So this is where, but we have a first step that the cooperation between SDM and EASA is a first tool, but I believe it will not be sufficient if you want to. Second point, to ensure that the target, it was mentioned by Mark earlier, if now the motivation is the CO2 emission reduction, fair enough. But what about having that in the performance scheme, which will enforce, if you want, or will table what would be the target for the new type of services to be provided by DNSPs later on, satisfying a new type of targets which are binding. We need to realize that today we put at EASA a lot of pressure binding legal basis for reducing the CO2 emission for engine. We could possibly mirror this also for ENSPs, the level of performance to be reflected in RP3, probably too early, but RP4, but this would give an indication to an ENSPs that something there will need to be satisfied and to be compliant. So that's the second thing I would say here.
Just to build on that for a moment, when you talked about those tools that are needed, you mentioned cooperation between you being one of those. What else did you have in mind there?
As tools, we have another tool which is called the environmental report. So the EU legislator is asking us to report every 3 years how good we are in terms of decarbonizing air transport. This tool is a way to publicize the quality of the service, the evolution of the infrastructure, how it's satisfying to the Paris Agreement or not. So that will be, and the next version, the next edition will be in 25, where I believe it will be very, very important that we can put into this reporting what has been decided to be deployed, implemented, not developed. It exists. That will be the turning point, we believe, for the future. So it's another tool we are having. But if I may, I have another tool, which is the link with the ATM Master Plan. ATM Master Plan does have, so far, a regulatory roadmap, which is what has been said in the previous panel, an instrument to enable suppliers to provide the services based on level of requirements. This ATM Master Plan and our rulemaking program at EASA should be aligned. That the stakeholders, all the stakeholders do see clearly what is the trajectory in terms of being compliant in the future when providing ATM services. And that is really another element. We are working a lot with the SESAR GU now.
Thank you. And Anna, you talked about it's already there now, that systematic approach towards standardization within SESAR projects. Is it just a question now of implementing that, or are there other things we need to do?
I think it is a question of implementing that, and that is happening. In the European ATM Standards Coordination Group, for example, they take a very structured approach now at identifying standardization needs, which most of them, but not all, come from SESAR, putting that into a plan, into this rolling development plan, and trying to get stakeholder buy-in for that plan, so that we can, because in the end it's not me writing a standard, I'm a lawyer, no one wants me to touch a pen and write a standard, but it's the members who will have to write the standard, and only if the priorities are agreed and shared, and there's buy-in on the priorities, will they come and write the standards in the end. So it's really important that we have the master plan update, which is launched now, that focuses on the priorities and that there's proper stakeholder buy-in. And I think everything this is set up in a way that we will get to that. And then from there on, we can plan our activities and we can make sure that we have the standards ready when they are needed. So yes, it's a matter of just doing it now, but it's also new, so we have to see how it plays out.
So for you, that key next step, that key priority, if we are to make sure that all of you and in all your roles really do contribute to this overarching goal that we have, is buy-in. You've got to focus on that for you. For you, Luke, what is the key? You've talked about a number of tools, a number of issues. Key next step.
Next step is really what I would be calling a partnership. It's mentioned on that slide. I think today somebody said that there are still too many silos. And you mentioned different institutions, different bodies. It will work only if there is a willingness to working together. And we have seen that 2 weeks ago when EASA organized his annual conference, as this one, but for EASA. There was a call from the member states, national authorities, supervisory authority for aviation, industry, to work together, the three of us, in order to enable a quick capability to react, the agility needed in order to satisfy to the climate change goals we are having today. Without that, there will be no way to get through.
Thank you very much. You have the last word, Mariagrazia.
Yeah, so I fully agree with what has been said before, is working together and have the buy-in from the investors. They need to be convinced that what is coming out from the research and is covered by what is needed from standards and regulation side, and we can facilitate the implementation, but is delivering a benefit, because this is what they need. It's beyond the regulation. They need to be convinced that there is the right buy-in from their side, that there is a benefit at the end.
And when we look at that innovation pipeline, those very large-scale demonstrators showcasing those benefits, absolutely central. We haven't talked about that so much so far today. But on that note, ladies and gentlemen, will you join me in thanking our panel very much indeed? Thank you for a great conversation.